This is part 3 of my Outlander Season 7, Episode 15 review, titled Written in My Own Heart's Blood. As always, if you are looking to avoid spoilers from the books or the show, please do keep on scrolling. So we see Roger and Buck go back to Lallybroch because Roger wants to write Bree a letter informing her of where he ended up back in time. Because again, she thinks he went to a certain time and he went beyond it. So he wants to clue her in as to where they are located. And so he knows that if he writes a letter and leaves it in this desk does not leave this room. It stays in this room until her and Roger own the home in the future. In the books, the desk is described as being so huge that they couldn't get it out the door. So I don't know why they chose to make it this kind of smallish desk in the show. And so Roger pens a letter to Bree and leaves it in the books. He leaves it in this hidden compartment in the desk. In the show, they just haven't put it in a drawer. Which to me, I'm like, someone would have found that over the course of hundreds of years. But again, minor detail that bugs me. And then Buck explains to Roger that they need a decoy letter because Brian Fraser thinks that he's going to help them deliver a letter. So they actually need a letter to hand him. So Buck writes a letter to his mother, Galis Duncan, because if Roger was going to have a moment to kind of insert himself into his parents' life in some significant way, Buck wants that opportunity with Galis. So we see Roger place the letter for Bree in the desk drawer. And again, why is this drawer empty? Someone would find it in this drawer. Why are they not making this make sense? And in the future, Bree is walking around in the library and pulls out a book from the library stacks that is actually written by Frank Randall. And this is a book that is referenced in book 9 of the book series, Go and Tell the Bees That I Am Gone, as well. Now, I made a whole series of videos, but one major video about Frank's letter to Bree in the books, and they completely wrote that storyline out of the show, which really bums me out because it was one of my favorite storylines. I don't want to take up too much time in this video re-explaining the letter, so go back on my profile and watch that video if you want to see what actually happens in this scene in the books, because it does involve a letter from Frank that he wrote in the past that Bree finds in this desk. But the book that Bree pulls off the shelf was written by Frank Randall, and it's called The Soul of a Rebel. Part of the letter that Frank writes to Bree in the books, he does kind of make a joke about how if Bree ever wanted to read his books, he thinks it might be useful to her. And this is a major Easter egg for that reason, because in this book, there's actually a lot of information about a battle that takes place in book 9. It's the Battle of King's Mountain. And in the book, Frank actually writes that Jamie dies during that battle. So this is, again, if Bree had read Frank's books, she would have then learned of Jamie's death that Frank wrote. But I suppose since they aren't giving us Frank's letter in the show, seeing his face in this way is kind of their way of nodding to that storyline and acknowledging it without actually going through with it all in the show. But we do see Brianna write her own letter to Roger, which she does do in the books as well, and kisses the envelope and seals it and leaves it for him in the drawer, and finds Roger's letter in the desk drawer. Now again, there's a whole storyline with Bree that they are just cutting out entirely, where she goes to America. She meets with Joe Abernathy. I've talked about this at length in past videos that I've made talking about what happens in the books, so be sure to go watch those if you're curious. But this is how Bree finds out what year Roger is located in, and helps her when she goes back in time to channel that energy and find him there. She does, however, have the added pressure of Rob Cameron and his men looking for her, trying to get after her because of the letter that Frank writes to her. So again, I've done many videos. I don't want to take up too much of this video talking about it, but go back and watch those if you're curious. Back at the British camp, we see Fanny coming up to William and screaming at him, saying, "Where have you been? You promised you would protect us and you weren't here." And we learn that Jane has been taken. This is a scene that happens closer to the end of the book, and there's more moments between the three of them in the book that I guess the show is, again, just condensing. So they're speeding up the Jane storyline quite a bit here in the show. But Fanny tells William that someone recognized Jane and accused her of being the one to end Harkness's life and took her away back to Philadelphia and is holding her captive there. In the books, Fanny follows her and stands outside the building trying to get inside to help Jane, and they don't let her in, and then she comes back to the camp and finds William at that point. In the books, William is pretty sure who the Colonel is, the home that Jane is located in, and that it's either Colonel Campbell or a man named Jenkins, who is the one responsible for taking Jane away from Fanny and away from the camp. And in the episode preview for 2 weeks from now, the finale, we do have a scene where William goes to Lord John Grey and asks for his help, which is likely going to involve the search for Jane. I did a character profile on Jane. If you want to go back and watch that, you'll find out in that video what happens to Jane. It's a very sad story, so I wouldn't be surprised if they put that in the finale, and it's going to break my heart. Back at Lollybrock, we finally have the scene where Roger admits that he was being irrational to Buck and apologizes. And this is where Buck is basically offering himself to go forward in time again to where Brianna and the kids are and let them know where Roger is. Because again, at this point, they don't know where Jemmy is. So Roger wants to stay in this time in case Jemmy is there, and Buck wants to be able to go tell Brianna and Mandy where they are located in time. Part of the reason why Buck wants to do this is because he doesn't think he's a good man, and he explains to Roger his actions as a husband and how he doesn't think he's a good person. And this is one small way that he is able to save his family and his blood, because Roger is kin to him. He is, I think, 4 times great-grandchild, which is just crazy to think about. But to him, this would be a way for him to make amends for the poor decisions and actions he's made in the past. He also firmly believes that his wife is better off without him returning to his own time. So at this point, he doesn't think he has anything to lose by going back to find Bree. Roger doesn't necessarily want to send him yet. He wants him to think about it a little more because the implications of it and traveling back and forth so frequently in such a short amount of time can be detrimental. They don't know how that will affect his health. And again, we saw that he has chest pains when he travels through time. So there's a lot going on in Roger's mind about why Buck shouldn't be the one to do this. And at the same time, we see Brianna with the kids at Craignadoon getting ready to go back through the stones. In the books, she actually travels to America. She's there for a while before she comes back to the stones at Craignadoon and goes through them. And again, she's being chased at this point. And while they're passing through the stones, they're literally having Rob Cameron's cars pull up, and they can hear them in the distance, and they're trying to leave quickly. And it's a lot more stressful in the books, this journey through the stones with the kids. But Mandy in both the books and the show is just a very hyper energetic child, and so she wants to bring her toy Esmeralda, and Bree has to deal with that, and then she just runs towards the stone, and she does that in the books too, and so it's a little chaotic when they're running through, but she can feel Roger. So when she's yelling daddy, it's because she can feel where Roger is. And earlier when Bree goes to America and sees Joe Abernathy, who again is Claire's friend from season 3 in Boston, they test Jemmy and Mandy's powers with him, and they figure out that she is really powerful, and so she can feel Roger from a great distance, similar to how she feels Jemmy and how she can feel Brianna as well. In the books, when they test it, she can feel Jemmy up to 4 miles away, which is crazy. In the episode preview, we saw this shot of the hand with the gemstone, and now we know that it's Jemmy's hand. And so her and the kids travel through the stones, and in the books, we know that they will eventually reunite with Roger at Lollybrock. So while he's there currently, Bree ends up beating Buck to it and showing up at Lollybrock before he even has to go back through the stones to find her and the kids. Then back at the Battle of Monmouth, we see that the Redcoats are coming at this point, and chaos ensues at the church. Everyone is starting to retreat, but Claire says that she will not leave her men because she's obligated to take care of them. I remember there's a moment in the books where Claire says she would leave if necessary, but then in the show, obviously she's making a point to say that she wouldn't. I couldn't find it when I was looking back, but I do remember thinking that it was odd in the book reading that moment. So we see Rachel and Denny leave, which ends up being detrimental to Claire that he's not there, and chaos ensues after that. So come back for the next part to discuss the big scene of the episode with Claire.